Hello everyone. It's time for Mike to check out some Micron systems. It's still odd to me that Micron made PCs, although these are most likely built after they sold off their PC division. Well, let's tear into these. Okay, I'm going to start with the ClientPro. I see we have some oddware up there. Those are actually a set of stereo speakers, and they fit in a 5¼ drive bay. Well, that's a first for me. We also have a CD burner down here, some ultra convenient front-mounted USB ports, and speaking of odd, that's actually just a regular old full-face floppy drive back there. That's awfully strange to see in a case with a molded floppy drive face. And we are badged as a Pentium 4, and squarely in the Windows XP era. Looks like that speaker actually has some directionality to it. You can actually, yeah, you can push it to one side. That is funny. Uh-oh, I don't think it was supposed to go that far. Oh, there we go. It's definitely not secured in there properly. We'll have to take a look at that. And here's a look at the back of the machine. And I'm assuming this is for those speakers. Just a regular headphone jack style connector, or a TRRS. I can't imagine it's anything else. And this thing has lots of I/O options. We have a regular OG serial port there, got our coaxial digital audio output, 4 USB ports, got a FireWire port, a NIC, and all the audio outputs your heart desires. We also have some kind of video card there, looks like it might be an interesting one, and some additional USB ports, in case 4 on the back and 2 at the front are just not enough. And here's a close zoomy look at that label. This thing was manufactured June 6, 2002. And we have a Windows XP Pro COA sticker here, so this thing must have belonged to a big business boy. At least I'm assuming so with that enterprising name, ClientPro. And this case has quite a stance to it. I checked the back and no feet are missing, so I guess that's just how it stands. I guess with being a professional grade PC it needed to have good posture. You have to set a good example for the rest of the employees. Alright, let's get this thing open. That's cool, this case has these release handles back here. They just pop off. So convenient. We've definitely seen some moisture. Got some corrosion here and here. I'm not seeing it in very many other places though. That is strange. Perhaps we got lucky. And somebody got the hard drive. So no OS archaeology on this one. And upon closer inspection, I see this thing has definitely been upgraded. This thing has SATA, DDR2, and PCI Express, unless we found evidence of time travel. That is one pretty motherboard though. I love the black PCB with the blue VRM heatsinks. That's a nice combo. This is definitely the newest motherboard I've found yet in these systems. Alright, let's check out that video card, assuming I can figure out how to release it. Okay, that was easy. Okay, that's looking like an NVIDIA card. And yep, NVIDIA 8400GS. So somebody was balling on a budget. You put 2 more of these in here, you might be able to run Crysis. Just kidding. That card doesn't even support SLI. But you could certainly do some interesting things with 3 PCIe 16X slots. This board was downright drool-worthy. Alright, let's clear these cables out. It's interesting that we have Molex power on the motherboard. I guess something has to power those 3 PCI Express slots. Oh, you know, this had me confused for a second. This is actually how those speakers get their power. Yeah, I guess why not get Molex power? It's the most convenient. And we've got some adapter action for the CPU power connector. Speaking of the CPU, let's see what that actually is. That is definitely an Intel Core style heatsink mount. And these things get on my nerves. And that's an Intel Core 2 Duo. Let's get it cleaned up. That chip's from around 2006. Depending on when this thing was upgraded, that was quite the upgrade for the time. Let's pull that thing out of there. Ew, LGA. Yeah, this thing might be a little too far on the modern side for my taste, but everything seems to be in order. Nothing sketchy on those pads. I've already cleaned up that heavy-handed application of thermal paste. So let's just put this chip back in there for now. Now let's check out that RAM. That stuff's looking consumer-grade gamey. Yep, the mid-2000s was definitely the beginning of the heat spreader obsession. And this is a 2 gig stick of DDR2, 800 megahertz, and the one below it looks identical. And indeed it is. It's always nice to have a matching set. And 4 gigs in the mid to late 2000s. And that was quite a bit of RAM for this time period. I wonder why they skimped on the video card. Okay, this here can't possibly be a coincidence. This motherboard has a header for that case intrusion switch. That's what this is right here. And all that does is let you know somebody opened your case. Unless that intrusion header is more ubiquitous than I realized, and I've just been overlooking it all these years. It makes me think that this motherboard came out of a similar system. And I see we have a rogue screw bouncing around down there. There's also something funny going on with that front panel connector. Maybe they just got lucky, or maybe this board is just really similar to the board that was in here. We'll have to see if all of those functions actually work. Okay, let's go ahead and pull this board. That'll make it easier to clean this dust out. Now, how do I pull this board? I don't see any screws. Oh wait, I've seen this before. This must use one of those retaining plate things. Yeah, that must be what this screw is all about. Now this should slide back. Let's get that retaining plate off of there. And there it is. It is convenient, I'll give them that. And here's the model number for that board. It's that D975 keyboard mash looking string, the one with the barcode. It's not the E210882 number. That was awfully confusing. That one's actually the UL file number. That discrepancy added minutes to my Googling. And we were definitely well past the capacitor plague at this point. I'm seeing Nichicons everywhere, and not a single sign of trouble. Now let's go ahead and pull these north and south bridge heat sinks, because we may as well refresh the thermal paste. And these clips are interesting. You actually have to spread the heatsink fins to get them out. Yeah, I'd say that pad is as good as gone. And that heatsink was pretty stuck on there. And we can see clearly why. That thermal pad is also as good as gone. Okay, let's get this board cleaned up with an anti-static brush. And I think it's funny that Intel used these blue fiery heat sinks for their VRMs. And those are definitely from Intel, because the picture in the manual has the same heat sinks. I guess they were going for that sporty, gamey look. Okay, let's get these chips and their heat sinks cleaned up. Now, these are always fun. This heatsink's going to take some scraping. Well, that's as good as that one's getting. Well, that's enough of the little heat sinks. Let's service the big heat sink. As you can see, maintenance was not a top priority for the previous owner of this system. That thing is really plugged up with dust. Let's go ahead and get that fan off. And I gotta say, I'm not a fan of how this attaches. I'll be surprised if none of these break. And there we go. I am officially surprised. Yeah, I'd say we're a little down on airflow capacity. Just a little. Let's see, how do I remove the rest of this? Okay, that seems simple enough. I could have probably just done that in the first place. Well, maybe not. That's kind of requiring a lot of flexing, which I don't think would be possible with the fan attached. Oh, that was annoying. Let's clean this thing up. You know, it's a miracle I didn't sneeze at all. Not even once. Okay, let's see what that fan even sounds like. It seems like it sounds fine, but it does seem pretty cheap, so let's see. And yep, sounds perfectly fine. So all we need to do is clean it up. There is almost a beauty to it though. Just the texture of the way the dust built up on those fan blades. Or maybe I've been doing this too long. Alright, that cleaned up pretty well. Okay, now, let's get these heat sinks back on. With all the engineering prowess that Intel must have in their employ, I can't believe that's the best method they can come up with for attaching a heatsink. Or perhaps it was just the cheapest. And that battery's kinda low, but not low enough for me to spend 60 cents on a replacement. No sir. Okay, now I want to get these drives out of here. I also want to figure out what kind of calculation they did to get those speakers in there, because it looks like the 5¼ inch drives are on rails, and it seems like in order to accomplish that feat I have to remove the faceplate. That seems simple enough. Looks like all I have to do is press these 2 tabs down. Yeah, it couldn't be simpler. I'm actually starting to really like this case. Yeah, those speakers are way off the rails. Let's see if I can exfiltrate them. Oops. What an odd little contrivance. Let's wipe it off. Let's see how well that rotation action works now. That is real sticky. I'd say it could probably use some grease, but I could see that getting messy. So I think we'll just leave it alone. It is absolutely not suitable for mounting on these rails though. Somebody was really trying to make that work. Now let's get that CD and floppy drive out of there. You know, something tells me we're missing something for that floppy drive mount. I just have a feeling. I'm gonna have to remove the other side panel. And if you're working on one of these cases and you're puzzling on how to do that, it requires faceplate removal. And then after that, you have to squeeze these 2 tabs outward and then push on it. And be ready to catch it, obviously. Okay, I guess we don't have access to the other floppy drive screw. Interesting. Okay, that other screw must serve as some kind of slider. So let's remove this one. Aha! Indeed it does. And there's actually 2 of them. Okay, so maybe we're not missing something. Except for these very special screws. And I know there's a name for these type of screws, but it's the type of thing I can't even think of the search terms for. Screw with thick upper shank? If you know the proper name for these screws, please let me know, because apparently this case requires those to mount the hard drive as well. And that floppy drive is a good old Panasonic, with a painfully long model number. Let's wipe that off. Let's get this thing cleaned up. It does have its fair share of dust. Let's get that face off. And the door. Now I can start sweeping. Now let's clean those heads. Not too bad. But that lead screw is dry as paper. Let's clean and grease that. And this is just white lithium grease here. This drive also requires grease up here, so let's clean that off. And add just a teensy bit underneath these plastic tabs. There we go. Okay, let's reface this thing. And that CD burnerator is made by NEC with a manufacture date of March 2002. So it's possibly original to the system. Let's get that dedustified. And this case is a terrible mess. Let's clean it up. And would you look at that? They give you spare drive screws. And those are the weird slidey screws for the hard drive I was looking for. Wow, some people are just way too kind for this world, as are the people who designed this case, and I wish them infinite happiness. Okay, let's check out that power supply. It's made by Dynex, which is a Best Buy brand, and surprisingly, it doesn't seem all that terrible. They even went to the trouble of putting this lovely metallized emblem on the fan grill, and it actually has some pretty decent weight to it. Weight is usually a pretty good indicator of a power supply's quality, at least in my experience. So let's test it out. Yeah, the sacrificial hard drives are back. Let's see if this power supply can do them in once and for all. Nope, not today. Running just fine. Let's load up that 5-volt rail. No trouble. Alright, let's give that 5 minutes. And that's 5 minutes. I think we have a winner. Okay, I have got to experience these speakers. They just look like they sound terrible. But first I have to get these rails on here. And that may be easier said than done. Yeah, these rails were not designed with this thing in mind. They feel like they're gonna break. And I definitely don't want to break them, so I'm just gonna set this speaker in here. I'm definitely not keeping these in this case. These need to go into something far more whimsical. And this thing probably wants his face back. I know I would. Does everybody know what time it is? Testing time! Alright, let's test this thing. Let's give it some DOS. And see what it does. Oh, it's not happy. Slow beeping, that's RAM. You know, I had already cleaned these edge connectors preemptively. Guess I just didn't do a good enough job. I'm gonna go over them again and see what that gets us. Okay, let's try this again, with less enthusiasm this time. Aha, that's what it took. And we don't sound happy about booting at all. And I'm not sure why I have a blank screen. Yeah, all I get are faily noises from that drive, so I guess it's no good. Okay, I've got another drive lazily installed. Let's try now. Okay, it's definitely booting, but I still have a black screen. This has got to be some video capture shenanigans. And yep, it sure is. That thing booted up just fine. I guess we're doing this the old school way. Okay, let's find out what that CD drive has to say about all this. Well, it opens right up. That's a good start. Doesn't sound great. Doesn't sound like it cares to spin up either. Let's see. Oh no, it works. Guess it's just one of the quiet ones. I hear it spinning now. Okay, let's see if it'll read a CDR. That's not always a given, even though it is a CD burner. And it sure does. So that means it's time to try to boot Knoppix next. Let's get that disk out of there. Control-Alt-Delete. Let's find out. Okay, we booted, but wow, no startup sound. Maybe those speakers don't work. Let's try to play it manually. Okay, they did play, but they're incredibly low. Let's turn everything all the way up.
Initiating startup sequence.
There we go. Okay, they don't sound too terrible. They sound about as bad as laptop speakers. Let's hear the shutdown sound.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
You know, it's not that bad, but I really need to hear some music through it. The good old YouTube audio library to the rescue. Okay, that's about all I can take of that. Well, it's not quite nails on a chalkboard, but they're definitely not going to have any audio files raving. I think these things are just designed for people who are just incredibly short on space. Alright, let's shut this thing down.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Ah, there it is. Well, it's too bad it doesn't have its original motherboard. This thing is kind of like a sleeper from back in the day. I don't know if an LGA 775 motherboard with DDR2 is considered retro cool just yet, but you never know. That stuff's getting up there in years. And those speakers. What am I going to do with those speakers? It's got to be something funny. And too bad about that floppy drive. But that's okay, I've got plenty of those. Let's move on to the next system. Next up is the Micron Millenia XBT. Hey, that looks like an IDE DVD burner. Those are always super useful, and somewhat rare around here. And I see we allegedly have a Pentium 3 in there, also badged for Windows ME and Windows 98. And I just love that Micron uses that generic looking case badge. Looks like this thing was just a regular custom built system. You could tell this was the end times for Micron's PC division. You know, something tells me that's not a Pentium 3 motherboard. That thing has onboard everything, including video, 4 USB ports, and a NIC. I've certainly not seen many Pentium 3 motherboards that were so equipped. And someone went expert mode on blocking these expansion ports. Well, that residue is going to be fun to clean off. And that warranty sticker has a date, December 11th, 2001. And this is too funny. That's today's date. So this is being recorded on this system's birthday. 22 years young. Either that or that's just a service date. And those are the strangest power supply screws I ever did see. They're thumb screws. And it looks like they calculated this case in order to get that power supply to fit. In more ways than one. Strangely enough, this case is supposed to have an SFX power supply in there. That in itself is kind of strange for this case. I guess SFX power supplies are slightly cheaper. And we have a Windows ME COA sticker there. I guess Windows XP was just too cutting edge for this system. Okay, let's get this thing open. Yeah, that ain't no Pentium 3. Yeah, that looks like socket 754 to me. But that is a very nice cooler there. A Zalman sunflower cooler. And I see somebody snatched a hard drive. See, we have remnants here of what looks like a hard drive component. Possibly the surround for a Samsung hard drive. And hey, free screws. How generous of them. And a stubby little IDE cable. 80 conductor. Okay, how in the world did they have the front panel connected? This has that proprietary Micron block connector. And I don't see that matching up or even fitting to this motherboard. Okay, well I guess it does fit. Don't know if it works or not. I guess the power button must at least work, because I don't see any calculation on that front. Okay, let's get everything disconnected. They were definitely keeping their cabling costs to a minimum. And since this power supply is mostly out anyway, let's just go ahead and get rid of it. Okay, what is this all about? This looks like a CD audio cable, but it runs behind the motherboard. Okay, that has me way too curious. Let's pull that motherboard out of there. Okay, I guess the I/O shield's coming with it. That cable was just pinched behind the motherboard. Okay, tell me how that happens. Alright, CPU, let's find out who you really are. And that's pretty stuck on there. There we go. And that's some kind of Athlon 64. Let's get this plastic bracket out of here, since it came loose. Let's clean up that chip. And that's an Athlon 64 3000 Plus. I think those are clocked to 2 GHz by default. And oddly enough, I think that's an OEM part number. So perhaps this motherboard or that chip were harvested from another system. And the capacitor plague is real. Though I'm surprised it's just that one that's leaking. The other ones look fine. But of course that doesn't mean they're good. Hopefully I have the appropriate value on hand to replace that. Now let's check out that RAM. Well, bravo! They sure were proud of themselves. Got a 512 meg stick of DDR1 there. Let's check out the other one. And that's an identical stick for a total of 1 GB. Very nice. And I do not have a single 1800 microfarad capacitor to replace that with, so we're just gonna have to run it. Most of the time that'll be fine, as long as it's not going under any heavy load. And that battery is alive enough for me to not replace it, thus saving tens of cents. And the motherboard itself is made by MSI, model K8MM-V, in classic MSI red. So colorful. Okay, how about the coolerator? It claims to be a quiet CPU cooler. Let's see just how quiet it is. I've heard quieter. Let's lift it off the bench just a little. Yeah, that doesn't change much. Oh well, at least there's no bearing noise. Okay, let's get that fan off. Yeah, we're not looking too bad in here. Let's get that swept out. Yeah, there we go, good as new. Or close enough at least. These were some of the nicest coolers one could own back in the day. I certainly would have been proud to have one, but I was broke. And in case you're wondering what these fins sound like, like a heavenly harp. The installation of that heatsink and its associated bracketry are quite fiddly things to get on camera, so I didn't. But rest assured, it's on there. Okay, it's drive time. And that floppy drive is made by Samsung, model SFD-321B, And there is a surprising amount of gravity in this thing. Maybe that means it's a good one. And that spindle is either sticky or just has a high amount of rolling resistance. I can't exactly tell which. It doesn't feel inconsistent, so I guess that's a good thing. And I love the way these things open. You just remove this little bitty screw, then the top just simply slides back, and then you lift it off. And it's actually really clean in there, and there is a lot of grease on that lead screw. I think we found the source of the weight. Let's get that freshened up. Hey, guess what? That DVD burner is made by A-Open. Who would have ever guessed? Manufactured April 2005, so a later addition to the system. And these things usually have bad belts, so let's go ahead and bench test it. Alright, power on. We got a blinky light. Let's see if it opens. And sure does. I'm actually pretty surprised. Every other one of this model drive has had a bad belt so far. Maybe this one was stored better. Let's see if it closes. Now, can you do that again? Sure can. Alright, that saves me a belt. I'm saving all kinds of pennies on this thing. Okay, this power supply is something special. Branded Mad Dog Multimedia. With fancy graphs and all. That is cool though. It says the fan RPM adjusts with the load. Surely if they went through the trouble of making that, the power supply must be high quality, right? Right? It also has these LEDs on the back, which is something I've not seen before. It also has a blue switch of unknown functionality, and it's quite clicky. And it has not one but two gilded grill fans. And here's yet another oddity. It has this Molex connector on its own dedicated cable, with a ferric bead on the end, and it's marked as VGA HDD. One could only assume that provides more stable power. It's not something I've seen before. Okay, let's test this thing. We are providing only the best power to our sacrificial hard drive. Let's see what this thing does. Okay, we have good voltages, and the A LED is lit, whatever that means. Fans seem quiet enough. I wonder what pressing that blue button does. Okay. Oh, that's fan speed. Okay, so that's some kind of manual override. Oh, that's cool. I guess that's automatic, slow. Oh, okay. Doesn't go to S automatically. Interesting. But that time it did. Well, that's confusing. Let's see if it can survive 5 minutes. And turns out it can. That power supply is good. Alright, let's test it out. Now, am I going to attempt to boot DOS 622 on an AMD 64 CPU? Of course I am. And we are posting. And we are booting. And we've got a CD driver. It is kind of annoying how the screen is cut off there. That's just video capture roulette, I guess. Okay, let's see if that optical drive works. And it sure does. How about CDRs? And yep, sure does. Let's actually go ahead and boot up into Canopix. Let's get that floppy disk out of there. Control-Alt-Delete. Boot. That drive sounds fast. Well, that is some high resolution. Let's see if I can make that a little better without breaking things. Let's see what modes we have. Yeah, that thing's full HD. Let's go to 1366 by 768. Yeah, that's better. Although my terminal window is now huge. This isn't the most performant graphics card in the world. Pretty laggy, even with this basic 2D stuff. Let's see, what do we have in this system? Oh, that's a mess. You know what, let's just maximize this. An S3 Unichrome Pro. That sounds basic. Yep, this thing is VIA through and through. Now, I didn't hear a startup sound. That usually seems pretty hit or miss. Let's try to play one.
Initiating startup sequence.
Yep, sound card works. Well, you know, I want to see just how responsive that power supply is to load. But there really isn't very much on the Canopix disk that's so CPU intensive. So let's try a good old Forkbomb. A bash Forkbomb, that is. Let's see if I can remember this. No, the space was after the curly brace. I think that's it. Let's see. Yeah, things are already getting quite messy. Yeah, we are freezing up. Can't even run top. CD drive's going nuts. Yeah, that thing's not happy. Let's see how long it takes the power supply to notice. A Forkbomb is a type of denial of service attack. It basically just spawns processes endlessly until they take over all resources. Well, it seems marginally noisier. It's really hard to tell though. And I guess the CPU alone isn't very much load, with this being a 330 watt power supply. But that was one effective Forkbomb. Even the clock stopped updating. Yeah, there's absolutely no way I can kill that. This is going to require a hard shutdown. Well, you know what? That got me curious. How much excess power consumption can a Forkbomb cause? So I've got the old kilowatt to help us find out. See, this machine is using about 58 watts at idle. And this is cool. Even wiggling the mouse causes an increase in power consumption. It takes 2 watts to move your mouse. Alright, let's Forkbomb it. And yeah, we've nearly doubled in power consumption. Okay, we're peaking out at about 110 to 115 watts. The CD-ROM adds about 5 watts when it spins up. And it's interesting at this level, moving the mouse has no effect on the power consumption. I guess there's just no time to process those inputs. Well, that answers that question. Okay, let's clean this thing up. It looks like it shouldn't take more than just a basic wipe down. This case is actually in pretty good condition. Yep, it's all coming right off. And getting in these ain't easy though. Okay, that turned out really well. This thing looks almost brand new from the front. Let's see if we can say the same for the top. Well, we've got some paint stress here and there, but overall, still pretty good. Now, as for this duct tape residue, I guess I'm going to use some of this gooey goo crapola. I would normally use WD-40, but let's see how this goes. The instructions say apply directly to surface, and let it sit for a few minutes. I kinda doubt that's gonna work well on vertical surfaces. And the pump doesn't work. I guess this bottle is just too old. I guess I'll just use the pickup tube as a dropper or something. Alright, several minutes later. Let's see how it does. Alright, it's coming off. Yeah, it didn't do as well on the vertical surface. Maybe this residue is just not gooey enough. Yeah, there was no way I was dribbling that stuff down the back of this thing. So I just used a paper towel soaked in WD-40, and that worked just fine. The backside has been de-gooed successfully. Well, yet another retro sleeper built into a Micron case. I wonder if these two systems are somehow related. It's kinda too bad it doesn't have its original Micron guts, but hey, I'll settle for an AMD 64. That is a legendary CPU. It was the first to introduce consumers to 64-bit computing, and it's one I used to lust after back then, especially with that Zalman cooler. And this case is in such good all-around condition, it's definitely a survivor despite the motherboard transplant. Well, that didn't turn out quite as expected. I definitely prefer my pre-built systems to be as original as possible, but given the chance at the time, I would have upgraded them too. And speaking of upgrades, we've crossed over 1 million views! And we're just days away from the 1-year mark since I started uploading. I never thought we could get there in such a short amount of time. Thank you all so very, very much. See you in the next one.